employee of the seventh sister. Then Fred starts to use his powers and asks if he could think a little more about these questions. The boy was with his conscience heavy, and then he starts to recover little by little his own sanity. And soon Arthur says that there is something strange happening. Alan, he starts to feel an intense pain at that exact moment, and all the people who were with the cameras start to record as fast as possible. That was live being reported on all televisions. Then Alan, he says that he is not an employee of the seventh sister, and that all this was commanded by Jessica Arthur. He doesn't understand how that could have happened, and the people who were with the cameras start to take several photos and to record all that situation. He starts talking that Jessica ordered him to set fire on Zhang's house and also to burn all the files. However, the girl says that all that was a lie and that she couldn't do that kind of thing. The officer asks Jessica what had happened at that moment, and the woman tries to downplay all that, talking that it was a lie and that everything was being invented. However, Alan refutes, saying that that in fact was all plan of her and Arthur. Then the officer starts to think about what she should do at that moment. And Alan, he wasn't understanding what he had done wrong, since he was only telling the truth. Jessica starts to get extremely nervous, and Federico asks if Alan has any evidence of the things that he said. Then Alan says that everything was inside his pocket, and our protagonist then cuts the ropes that were holding Alan's wrist. The boy thanks our hero and continues talking that all this was prepared by Jessica and that he could prove with just one thing. Then he takes out his cell phone with an audio that was recorded on the night that he was beaten. In that audio, it said that Jessica had agreed in having burned the Seven Sisters' house, that all that would have been planned. Both Jessica and Arthur started to tremble on their bases. And Alan? He continues playing the audio, talking that everyone should listen to that, because it was the only truth that he had in his hands. Fred ends up smiling and asks if the people have anything to say. Obviously that Jessica and Arthur start to deny all this, saying that that audio was fake. Then he asks the people to start observing better in her actions. The cameras start to realize everything that was happening, and soon Jessica ends up burning herself, asking how that boy could have betrayed her. He said that in fact he always dreamed of working for her, however this betrayal that she did with him left him very upset. The officer ends up placing the handcuffs on that girl's hand, and tells everyone to step away, and that she would take Jessica to the custody. Everything was being finished, and the reporters start asking to Jessica if she could explain herself. Arthur, who is there trembling with fear, he says that everything had ended at that exact moment, and the people already start to leave the room. And Alan? He starts to think better about his life. Time passes, and Jiang, together with Federico, end up leaving that place. She ends up thanking a little for everything that he did. He said that it wasn't anything special, and that he only used the knowledge that he already had. Then Jiang warns that a time of peace will come for her company, and that our protagonist, if he wanted, could help her with some things. She ends up asking if he could also help the sixth sister with certain things, mainly with her curse. Our protagonist talks that he was thinking there and this curse of her, and that he had even asked something to his masters, related to curses of this type. The master at the time had said something mysterious. She asked Fred what the master was wanting to say. When he spoke these things, they're kind of strange. He talks about the snakes that are used for curses, and one didn't appear. We ask if it was a snake with wings on its back, and if that really existed. At first, our protagonist, he doesn't know very well if this kind of thing exists, but he believes in his master. Then he talks that he will prepare some things and will go to the mountain to see if he finds the snake. Taking advantage of this fact, they say that they will go to the biggest shopping mall of the city, because it was necessary to buy some things there. Fred leaves the car running, talking that he will prepare the things. Then he visits the clothes store, then the accessories store, and finally the jewelry store, and he simply walks here and there with his hands in his pocket. But at that moment, his cell phone starts to vibrate. He decides to take it and check the messages. It was a message from Alice. It had been a long time since they had seen each other, and while our hero there he was using the cell phone, something ends up happening. A woman in front of him looks at Federico and says that he was taking photos of her. Fred gets confused, because he wasn't doing any of that, and the woman asks him to stop and delete those photos. Fred, he even tries to explain himself and that in fact he was only answering a message. Soon she ends up approaching, very irritated, until a fat gentleman he approaches asking what was happening. The woman, she explains all the situation about our protagonist was taking photos secretly, and the guy simply throws the glasses of drink that he was with, who approaches our hero completely irritated, asking why he had done this. The people around get completely irritated with the situation. And our protagonist? He even tries to explain himself and says that in fact he wasn't taking any photo, he was only answering a message. The man prepares to give a punch on our hero with everything, but at that moment he ends up dodging until he looks back, holding the arm of that gentleman. The guy keeps screaming, talking that it was hurting a lot. And our protagonist already talks that the guy there was the one who looked for a fight, then he already goes away even from these crazy people. And still tries to explain that everything was nothing more than a misunderstanding. The guy continues irritated, asking how that could have happened. However, someone appears asking what was happening there at that exact moment. The people look to the sides asking who would be that person, and it was the seventh sister who was there to protect our hero. The people get enchanted with her beauty. And Federico gives a hello to the girl again. She holds Fred's arm and simply asks what he was doing there. Because of this, everyone starts to get embarrassed knowing that our protagonist was accompanied by such a beautiful girl like that. She pulls our hero away at that moment, talking that they will go shopping. And the other one was getting even more irritated. The man who was accompanying this woman gives a slap on her with everything since he thought that she was lying. And meanwhile, Federico talks that she was holding him with too much strength. She asks if he doesn't like this sensation, and she explains that everyone was envious of him. That's why he was calling so much attention while they walked. And because of this, our big boy, he gets all excited. After that, they go away, and our protagonist leaves the car. He gives a goodbye to her talking to the girl to take care, and Jiang says that everything was okay, while Diana also gives a goodbye to him, and after saying goodbye, the car goes away. Then he starts to walk, going away to his house. But a mysterious shadow starts to appear behind our protagonist. He tries to give a direct attack that ends up leaving Federico confused. He already looks back, feeling that he will be attacked, and the guy already arrives attacking our hero, and Fred manages to defend himself. However, his opponent used the Tai Chi hand technique. Federico even says that this technique is very powerful, but he wasn't going to just stand there taking the hit. That's why he's able to block, creating an opening in his opponent, and gets ready to hit him hard with a punch to the ribs. The guy realized that Federico was very powerful and even ended up stepping back. If by any chance that blow from Fred had landed directly, the guy wouldn't have survived. The mysterious guy counterattacks using fire fists. That was being an intense battle, with both showing all their power. And after a brief moment, the guy stops and starts thinking. Making a respectful gesture, Federico asks who this man was and why he was attacking him. The guy acknowledges that Fred was very strong and said he lived up to his reputation, and said he was worthy of being a martial arts master. At that moment, Alice appears calling for her uncle. Fred realized that this guy was part of the Yu family, and she was already all cranky, saying she had sent messages to Federico, but he didn't respond. So she had to come in person to look for him. That's because he was with his sick sister and ended up getting into trouble with that chubby guy at the mall. Later, he sat down to have a chai and they talked. And Federico said that the Tai Chi hands of that man were very powerful. Alice says that it was to be expected, as her uncle is one of the greatest masters of the Yu family, and he was even considered one of the strongest guys in the city. The girl's uncle asks if, by any chance, Fred knows the identity of Lise. Of course, our protagonist knew that she was a super important girl, since she was the eldest daughter of the boss. However, her uncle was very serious and even ends up slamming the glass on the table. He even tells his niece to go cut some fruit for them. However, he wanted to leave her alone in the kitchen so he could talk to Fred. And that's exactly what she does, going to the kitchen. The girl's uncle speaks in a very serious way to Fred that they could never be boyfriend and girlfriend. Upon hearing those words from the uncle, he starts spitting out the juice, and even apologizes, saying those words were very sudden and ended up scaring him. While wiping himself, the guy reinforces again, saying that Federico should understand those words. They couldn't be together, and that was for the good of the girl, since she was destined to marry someone from the Vangue family. Our hero remembers very well that this Vangue family was no good. However, the girl's uncle keeps saying that, although Fred defeated the Zangui family, he could not compare to the suitor from the Vangue family, that they were very powerful. If by any chance the Yu family wanted to reach an even higher level, they should ally with this other family. However, Fred knew very well that this was not what Alice wanted, and asked her uncle if, by any chance, he had asked the girl's opinion. In response, the guy says that people at their level have family interests above all, but the most important thing of all would be Alice's happiness. That's what mattered. The guy gets so angry that he breaks the glass, and said he wouldn't argue with Fred anymore, he just came to deliver that notice, and that he should stay away from the girl. In a somewhat bold way, Federico asks what would happen if he didn't agree. Her uncle already gets angry, saying he's not going to go easy on the boy just because he's young. Alice appears and asks why her uncle was so angry, and he already gets up saying they finished talking with Federico and they should leave. The girl always felt happy when she was near our hero, so that's why she kept saying she didn't want to leave now. To try to calm things down, he says he has some things to do and that he will meet her later. The girl knew exactly what her uncle came to do, and she couldn't solve anything about it. And she even gets sad, asking if he's really going to leave now. However, in a rather cheerful way, he tells her not to be sad because he'll be back soon. He won't leave her waiting too long. The girl's uncle realized that this guy, besides being smart, was very powerful and that he should be careful with him. So Alice and her uncle end up saying goodbye, and our protagonist tells her to take care. He knew that even within the Yu family, they cared much more about power and influence. But now he should focus on saving his sick sister, since she was under that Inguiyang cultivation curse. He slept the whole night and woke up in good spirits. He changes clothes and wonders if, by any chance, the sick sister was already ready. They were going on a trip looking for a medicinal snake venom to be able to heal her cultivation. The neighbors even complained, saying that Fred was making noise early in the morning. Outside, it was him and his friend calling him Martial Uncle. The protagonist tells him not to keep calling him Uncle, since it sounded like he was an old man. In response, the guy says that the master and the sick sister were already at the airport waiting for him, and there was still a little secret waiting for our hero. However, the guy wasn't going to say what that secret was. He'd have to get to the airport to find out what it was. And that way, they head over there. The scene changes to the airport terminal in the city of Jiangsu. He thanks his colleague for the ride, and ends up spotting Julia from afar and starts shouting her name. The girl noticed that Fred had brought all the preparations in his backpack, and even says she's impressed because he seems much more committed than she thought. So he already gets all excited, telling them to head out quickly, but Julia had something she wanted to show him. She said she received a sealing talisman that her master had given her, and that she could only give it to Fred as a gift once he had done certain things. However, since she didn't know about her health condition, she goes ahead and gives him the seal. Fred knew very well what it meant to see those seals, and asked Julia if by chance she knows too. When the masters gave her this magic seal, they didn't say anything. They just said it would be important for Fred. And now begins a bombshell revelation, guys. Actually, Frederico already had the highest cultivation level when he was born. However, he was only able to use up to the 8th degree of strength. Julia is surprised, asking if he's currently at the peak of the true Chi realm. He said yes, and said his masters nurtured his body with all kinds of celestial treasures and also earthly treasures so that he could withstand his power. However, the boy was born so strong that the masters created several seals to be able to store his power. He had already managed to break one of those barriers using the seal that the sixth sister gave, and this one was the second seal. Quite surprised, she asked what his maximum power level would be, since he's so strong at such a young age. In other words, he wouldn't know how to say, but in fact, he basically had unlimited power, and currently he was in the realm of Marmaduke. To better understand, martial cultivation is divided into 6 realms, and reaching the peak of true Chi allows someone to be called a master. The higher realms, like the Soul Crossing realm and the Power Transmutation realm, were the second stage of legend, and people who reached this level were considered immortal beings. If all 8 of Fred's layered seals are broken, he will be able to become a legendary guy, even at the immortal level. And when she thinks about it, she even freezes, and Fred keeps waving his hand in front of her face to see if she's awake. After meditating a bit, she says it was already time for them to leave. Fred tells Julia she can keep that sealing talisman and give it to him later. They wouldn't break the master's rules, and she ends up agreeing. She couldn't imagine that her younger brother was such a strong guy. That way they end up traveling. And they go to the province of Mial, which was near the 100,000 mountains, close to the southern border. Julia had already scheduled with the driver and guide to take them to the mountains. This gets him all excited, saying that the older sixth sister was very smart. However, he was feeling something strange. It was as if someone was spying on them. The sixth sister even asks what happened, and he says it was nothing, he just had the impression that someone was watching. And so he leaves the airport. Outside, a car ends up stopping right in front of them. The girl introduces herself, saying she will be the driver and guide since she had been hired, and Julia thanks her, saying she arrived right on time. And shamelessly, the driver gets all flirty with Fred, saying he was very handsome. Julia introduces him, saying he's her younger brother, and the driver keeps flirting with our protagonist. Without further delay, Julia tells everyone to get in the car because they needed to arrive soon. On the way, the driver wouldn't stop talking. She introduces herself, saying her name is Lin Lin, and even says she knows the mountains very well and will be a great guide. Julia was already getting annoyed because this girl wouldn't shut up, and that way they continue the trip. But as expected, she kept talking the entire ride. We see that there really were people following Fred, and the guy picks up the phone telling his master that Frederico had already left the airport. On the other end of the line, the master says they shouldn't lose sight of Frederico and to keep pursuing him. This was the young master who was interested in our hero. The girl who was with him keeps telling the guy not to get so stressed about work and to try to have fun with her. However, he was a jerk and ends up throwing the girl's cup on the ground. This was Chen Ruong Ming, and he was the 4th son of the powerful master of the Chen family. Our protagonist had eliminated someone from his family, so he wanted to get revenge on Fred. And meanwhile, that driver wouldn't shut up. She kept talking about how the mountains in that region worked and said it was a very dangerous place. Even Fred, who was usually polite, was already getting irritated. She was saying that these mountains have many dangerous animals, and that it's the place in China with the most poisonous snakes. The vegetation in this place was lush, but there were many tigers and boas. Since it was a sparsely inhabited area, these animals ended up reproducing very quickly. And along the way, the driver comments that it's kind of strange for the road to be full of cars. And when they look in the rearview mirror, there were some cars that seemed to be chasing them. Since this was a sparsely inhabited region, there shouldn't be that much car traffic. Those mobsters were following Fred. It looked like they wanted to settle the score with him. This guy was known as Black Claw and was one of the most dangerous mobsters in the city. The rookie kid was even scared because they really intended to eliminate Fred, and then they start speeding up, wanting to hit the white car. Before causing an accident, the guy keeps saying he won't give Fred a chance to escape, and slams into the poor driver's car. She already starts screaming in desperation, saying it's a robbery. She panics, begging someone to call an ambulance. But the panic was so intense she couldn't do anything properly, and even notices that there were other cars crashing from the other side. The girl thought it was just a robbery, but soon realized it was about mobsters, and the panic started growing even more. To everyone's misfortune, the mobsters stopped in front of them, forcing the driver to brake as well. The guy already gets out of the car and says that Frederico had offended the young master of the Chen family, and that's why he was going to get beaten up. They were surrounded, and several guys with red bands on their heads got out. This red band gang was extremely well known in the city, and people were terrified of them. The driver says she knows these guys, and in other words, says they're screwed. However, Fred tells her to stay calm, and that he would take care of everything. He even asks who the boss of those guys is, and the girl gets super scared, asking if he doesn't know who they are. Looking through the window, Fred already realizes he's a bit stronger than the group's leader, so it would basically be a guaranteed victory. He opens the car door and tells the girls to stay hidden inside, because he would handle everything. There were about 20 to 30 mob henchmen outside, and the girl panics. Julia tells her to stay calm and count to 10, because that would be the time Frederico needed to deal with the problem. Not understanding anything, the driver asks how come she thinks that boy is going to handle those mobsters. A little annoyed, Julia insists, telling her to just count to 10. The driver puts her hand on her face and starts counting. And outside, our protagonist, also known as the background character Beater, was doing his job. Little by little, he started taking them down one by one. And the girl inside the car was counting, reaching number 4. To finish off the henchmen even faster, our hero grabs a baseball bat and starts smashing all the thugs in the head. The driver had already counted to 10 and asked Julia if that did anything. And when she looks through the window, she sees that Fred finished off everyone, leaving only their leader standing. Confidently, Frederico asks who sent them. All bruised, the Black Claw's leader says it was actually the master of the Chen family. However, Frederico doesn't know anyone from that family and asks why they were after him. To show he was telling the truth, the criminal said he didn't know the reason. He only followed orders. Fred says that if he doesn't speak up, he'll take him down. And humbling himself, the guy swears he doesn't know anything. He didn't even know the reason, he just followed orders and did what he was told. It seemed like this guy wasn't lying. He was just a henchman. And that's why our protagonist spared his life. And even tells the guy to get out of his sight. Desperate, and the guy thanks him and says that from now on, he'll value life more. Before anything else, Fred tells him to wait. He should pay for the damages caused to the driver's car. Then he comes back with a pile of money and offers it to the girl. It would be dangerous to accept money from mobsters, so she keeps refusing. However, Julia says she should just accept it, because it's compensation. And without thinking twice, the guide ends up accepting it. Before getting in the car, Frederico tells the mobsters to disappear and never mess with him again. Lin gets all excited, since the amount she received was even more than the price of her car. He asks if the car is still working so they can continue the trip, and the driver says yes. This car, although a bit old, was very tough, and so they take off from that place. The girl even says it was amazing that Frederico managed to deal with those mobsters alone, and to see if that girl would shut up, Julia says that Frederico is actually a super powerful mobster, known as Black Dragon the Black. Not even Fred could believe his sister was telling a lie like that, and the driver decides to keep her mouth shut. He even coughs a bit, trying to play it off, and asks Julia if that was really necessary. And we see that it worked, because the driver didn't say anything else during the trip, only that could make that annoying driver stay quiet. This was useful for Fred to figure out who was behind the attacks. It was probably the Chen family, and now he needed to figure out why they were doing this. Julia asks if he's sure it's the Chen family, and he says that mobster mentioned the name of that family. If they really are the ones behind the attacks, Julia already has an idea why. The Chen family is ranked 4th among the 10 great families in the city of Yangzhou, but Fred says he didn't get involved with that family, so there was no reason for them to be chasing him. However, what he didn't know is that the matriarch of the Chen family is the younger sister of the head of the Zhang family. And since our protagonist went there and wiped them all out, they were most likely seeking revenge on Fred. Besides having destroyed the Zhang family, Fred crushed the Chen family's hopes of becoming one of the top 3 most powerful. He asked why then the Chen family didn't send help when he went to destroy the Zhang family. That's because he was overestimating himself too much. In other words, nobody cared about Fred, that they didn't imagine he would pose a threat to the Zhang family. And when the Chen family found out about the destruction of their allied family, our protagonist had already handed over all the assets to Grandpa Yu, so they couldn't do anything. That meant they would keep chasing Frederico, because now they believed he truly posed a threat. And their journey to the 100,000 mountains won't be as easy as they thought. Fred even says that he has many powerful techniques he hasn't shown yet, so he could protect himself and Julia. And so they arrive at a hotel on the mountain. The driver is terrified and says they finally arrived at the place, asking if they would like her to take the bags out of the trunk. And she even calls Fred Mr. Black Dragon King, and Julia giggles in the background. A little later, at night, the sixth sister is training her cultivation to see if she had finally overcome that curse. It seems like everything was going normally, and she was even managing to release a bit of her spiritual energy. However, in a brief moment, she felt a terrible pain. It was as if all her wing-yang cultivation was being destroyed when she forced the spiritual energy, and she even falls to the ground, complaining that she was in a lot of pain. And we see a flashback of a guy casting a curse, and it was exactly this monk who had cursed Julia. With a wicked smile, he says he was completing part of his revenge. Hold on, guys, because we're about to see why this guy placed a curse on Julia and why she's suffering so much. The young master of the Chen family was with this monk, and he was using the curse cast on Julia to track her. He was part of a sect that was an enemy of the Seven Sages sect. That's why he was combining his desire to get revenge on that sect with the desire of Master Chen to get revenge on Fred. The scene changes to the Chen family mansion. The family leader was talking to someone very important. The person there was the leader of the sword sect, and he had come to find out about the death of his brother. This guy's brother had died in the battle at the Zhang family's house, and it was that super powerful guy that our Proto defeated. The head of the Chen family keeps saying that the one responsible for all of this is named Federico. He had gathered clues about how his brother had died, and ends up handing over a picture, saying that this boy who looks like Fred had defeated his brother in a very cruel way. That already leaves the sect master furious, saying that he needed to avenge his poor brother, and the guy also says that, before dying, the brother had all his cultivation destroyed, and that it was something Fred did just to cause pain. Obviously, this guy was lying just to influence the sect master, and he gets very angry, saying he needs to hunt down that boy. And to add fuel to the fire and make the guy even angrier, he keeps saying that Federico had powerful and terrible techniques, and even asks that this swordmaster join his family to wipe out Federico. Of course, he wouldn't let a relative, especially a brother, be killed in such an evil way. So, without a doubt, he would take revenge on Federico. The head of the Chen family starts celebrating, saying he got a great ally. They needed to stop Federico, since he was allied with the Yu family, and they imagined that if they let this boy live, their family would also be destroyed. He didn't just want to recover the Zhang family's assets, but also swallow the entire Yu family. Back at the hotel, Fred was commenting that the breakfast there was really tasty. Julia is happy that he liked it, but she seemed a bit worried. He was eating calmly, but noticed that she was feeling unwell, so he placed his hand on her wrist. The girl says she's feeling fine and that he didn't need to worry about her so much. In response, he says she looked weak and pale, and asks if she was on her days. She quickly pulls her hand away, and at that moment he realized that she had tried to use cultivation again. He gets mad at Julia, saying that if she kept trying to cultivate, it would only accelerate the curse process. She asks if he hadn't said that she had 2 more years to live, so she could try to cultivate. He had said that she would have 2 more years of life, but only if she didn't force cultivation. If she forced too much, she would only have a few more weeks of life. That already makes her desperate, asking, "What do you mean? I only have a few more weeks to live?" That's because the more she forced it, the more the curse would take root in her body. That's why they decide to go find this venomous snake to make the magic pill right away. The driver calls him Black Dragon King, and the people around them get scared, imagining that he's a mobster. The guy tells her not to call him by that nickname in front of others, because people might get the wrong idea. Already inside the car, she keeps saying that she's going to take them to the dangerous 100,000 mountains, where there are mythological beings. Julia says they're not going to that place. They're going even deeper into the mountains, to the area of venomous snakes. The driver gets a little scared because that region is even more dangerous than the one she thought they were going to. In response, Fred says that if she doesn't want to go, he'll take them there. She can drop them off on the road and they'll go on foot. He just needed her to stay there waiting for them to return. However, the guide says it's not a problem. Since she grew up in that place, she knows the mountains very well. And so, she ends up agreeing to take them there. She just needed him to pay an extra fee. In another car, there was a guy spying on our protagonist, calling the head of the Chen family. The young master ordered everyone to keep an eye out, and already started setting up a trap, going to those mountains to wait for the boy. It seems like these guys knew every step of our protagonist. He keeps saying he set up the perfect trap for Fred, and that he won't let him escape unpunished. He had gathered several fighters, and also that martial monk to beat Federico up. Everyone shouts that they are ready and that they're going to beat up this boy. That way the young master heads there, because he wants to watch everything up close. The people around him get all excited, because when the young master goes somewhere, it's a sign something grand is about to happen. The shameless monk keeps saying he wants a reward if the mission goes well. The young master says that if the monk manages to capture Federico, he'll be able to have all the women he wants. And Q-Ball cheers, saying that's exactly what he wanted. After a few hours, they arrive in the mountains in search of the venomous snake. Federico says they can't waste time and need to find that magic snake quickly. We see that the driver was a spy who was passing all the information to the Chen family group. She had her phone transmitting audio and keeps telling the two to wait for her. They were walking through the mountain looking for that magic snake. The driver starts asking a bunch of questions like what the snake is for, and if by any chance they are dealing with a curse within their clan. Julia asks why she wants to know that, and the driver quickly makes up an excuse saying she was just making conversation. The sixth sister says that this snake is very special and that they would recognize it by its appearance. Trying to cover up, Lin starts coughing, because she was transmitting everything by audio and needed to gather as much information as possible. Then she starts interfering, saying she knows this region well and will show the exact place where the snake is. Julia ends up falling for the trap and asks the girl to show the way. So, she goes ahead. She even lets out a wicked laugh because her trap was finally working. Moments later, they walk through the forest and the mountains. The place was very strange, and they start entering an area that looked like a swamp. Julia gets all excited, saying this guide really seems to know the mountains and that she'll give her a 20% bonus. With her arms outstretched, the driver tells him to follow her, saying she knew the exact path. They were almost reaching the trap, but she ends up slipping and falling into the bushes. She gets up quickly and says there are lots of snakes nearby, and that they need to hurry because that's where the snake they need is. Fred and Julia run over there, saying that if a snake bites, someone could die. That was the exact spot of the trap, and the driver starts celebrating because they fell for it perfectly. However, before Fred could step into the trap, he stops his foot. Lynn starts cheering, telling him to step already and fall into the trap, but he asks the girl if she's acted enough. Lynn asks what he's saying and says she doesn't understand anything. Then Fred takes a coin from his pocket and throws it on the ground, saying that this guide was actually a traitor. When the coin hits the grass, a trap activates. The girl asks how he found out, and he replies that tour guides never step into those areas of the mountains. So, most likely this girl wasn't just any guide. Besides, she had planned this from the beginning, and the two of them were the target. The girl laughs and says this Federico guy is really sharp, and even though he didn't fall into the trap, he had already fallen for her plan. What they really wanted was to lure Federico and Julia into an ambush in a dangerous place. That's because the head of the Chen family was arriving. He shows up in the middle of the forest and says he finally found his opponent. Our prota even jokes, saying he's so famous that even the young masters of the families are coming to visit him. The boy from the Chen family gets mad and orders the henchmen to take down Federico. The guys start surrounding him, wanting to defeat our hero. But the little villain didn't want them to kill the boy. He wanted Federico alive. Julia already gets ready to fight, even knowing she can't use cultivation because of the curse, but Federico tells her to relax because it's going to be easy to beat them all. He already had a plan in mind, grabs the girl's hand and starts pulling her. That makes Julia embarrassed, her cheeks turning red. He starts clearing a path through the enemies, punching those idiots. One of the henchmen pulls out a gun to try to shoot him, but the young master punches the employee, saying he wasn't supposed to kill the boy because he wanted Federico alive. So he orders everyone to capture Federico, promising a reward of $10 million to whoever manages to catch him. Upon hearing that amount, everyone gets motivated. The driver, who had fulfilled part of the deal, asks if the Lord will also give her share. With a bit of disdain, he says yes, and tells her to go to the car and get the suitcase with the money. She gets all happy and goes there, thanking young Master Chen. But at that moment, that monk grabs the girl. He says he likes her, that she's very cute. The young master says that if the monk wants to keep her, he can. And that's exactly what he does, saying he's going to enjoy her a lot. It seems she got the short end of the stick. She ended up betraying the protagonist and got into trouble. A little later, Federico and Julia managed to shake off the criminals. They were hiding behind a bush. With a reward of $10 million for his head, Julia even jokes about turning Fred into the villain. Then they could split the money, since Federico would probably escape from them easily. No more joking. She asks what he plans to do now that they're hiding. Our hero says he's going to use the henchman as bait to attract the magic snake. Julia agrees, saying it's a great idea. After a few hours, the henchmen start screaming that they were bitten by a snake. Federico and his sister go over there to see what happened. At that moment, they realize Federico had arrived. They even ask how that boy managed to do it. But what they didn't know is that the two of them were part of a cultivation sect, and they start beating up the criminals with everything they've got. A snake had bitten one of them, but it wasn't the one they were looking for. It was a red-striped snake. They needed a magic snake. Someone yells that a monster appeared, and Federico thinks it must be the magic snake. They run over there and see a giant serpent with even wings. That was the creature they were looking for. The henchmen point their guns and they start shooting, thinking they would be able to kill the beast. But the snake's skin was very tough, and the bullets had no effect. The sound of the guns makes the snake want to flee. It was very fast, so Federico couldn't stand still. He runs after it to try to capture the serpent. He even uses his cultivation to catch up to her. The snake was heading toward a very tall mountain. Julia asks if it will be able to climb that cliff. Federico responds, laughing. If she really thinks the snake can't do it. He tells his sister to go with him because they need to chase the snake and not let it get away. They run very fast and start climbing the mountain. The henchmen keep wondering who those two are, because they look like superheroes. The snake flies through the mountain, and it was very difficult, but they were managing to keep up. But Julia couldn't use her cultivation, so she started to fall behind. Federico tells her not to worry, because he will catch up to the snake. He needed the snake's venom to make an antidote against the curse on his sister's body. The henchmen also start climbing the cliff after the reward. But climbing that hill was very difficult. One of them slips and falls all the way down. At that moment, everyone realized it was more complicated than they thought. Federico even comments that those idiots will do anything for money. Julia says they're risking it all because of the money and asks why he's risking his own life. He looks at her without saying anything, and keeps climbing, leaving her full of doubt. She knew he was trying hard because of her, but she didn't really understand his motivations. She was 24 years old and Federico only 20, so she didn't think he wanted something more with her. Remembering that they call each other siblings, but they actually grew up together in an orphanage, which is the sect of the Seven Masters. They're not blood siblings. When he reaches the top, he sees the snake trapped in a cage. Who was there was exactly the warrior whose brother had been defeated by Fred. The guy asks if he's Federico, and our hero says yes. Right after, the warrior asks if he's looking for that snake. Humbly, Federico greets the guy and politely asks to hand over the snake, because he needed its venom. But the swordsman wouldn't hand it over so easily. Frederico would have to defeat him in a duel, and then he would give the snake as a prize. Our hero wasn't understanding anything, but the guy already starts unleashing his power, and you can tell he's very strong. The monk was down below and commented that Frederico probably wouldn't survive. The young master said that Frederico couldn't die, since he wanted the boy alive. So he ordered the monk to climb up there and make sure the boy survived. That shameless bald guy kept saying it would be great to get up there, because he also wanted to take Frederico's sister. The young master didn't care and said he could have any woman he wanted, as long as he had permission. And so, that bald man, with no scruples, started climbing. Confidently, he said he could handle fighting Fred, but deep down he was a little scared, since Frederico had defeated the Zhang family alone. He even said that without Fred in the way, he could wipe out the Yu family. Fred was dueling with the swordsman, but it was hard to dodge the attacks. He even asked why the guy wanted to fight him, since they didn't even know each other. The swordsman replied that he was Kun's brother, the one who was defeated by our hero. Fred remembered that guy, and also remembered that he hurt Alice, so he beat him up. Now this new warrior was there to avenge his brother's death. Fred knew that if he slipped up near this guy, he could even lose an arm. So he managed to dodge at the last moment and to prepare to punch to his chest. And that's what he did, but the opponent was very strong and ended up throwing Fred far away. That was a battle at the peak level of the true Qi realm. The two began to praise each other, recognizing they had advanced cultivation. But the swordsman thought Fred was being arrogant and started swearing, saying that the young master had told him everything. Julia appeared at that moment and asked what was going on and why the snake was trapped. Fred pointed to the swordsman and explained that he was the one who trapped the snake and that he wanted to fight to avenge his brother's death. Julia knew that guy's brother and said he was a scumbag, so probably the swordsman wasn't any better either. The swordsman really seemed to believe that his brother was a good person and began cursing the Yu family, saying they were traitors for having killed his brother. Julia said she wasn't going to let those guys do whatever they wanted with her little brother and charge at the swordsman, but she wasn't strong enough, since most of her cultivation was sealed. While watching the fight, Fred realized that the guy was being deceived, probably by the Chen family. He needed to tell the truth, or else he would have to keep fighting the guy for hours. Respectfully, Fred said he didn't defeat his brother dishonestly. It was a fair battle, and he only did it to save his friend from the Yu family. That left the swordsman a bit shocked, and he asked what really happened in the battle at the Chen family's house. Fred explained that it was a fair fight, and that he only did it to save a girl. He said if the swordsman doubted it, he could investigate on his own. The swordsman replied that the sword warriors always honor the family's name, and that they would never act treacherously. It seemed he really didn't know his brother well, because the guy was pretty evil. Then, pointing his sword at Fred's neck, he said he would look for the truth, and if he found out Fred lied, he would hunt him down no matter the cost. Fred made another respectful gesture and said he would accept any punishment if he was lying. At that moment, the monk appeared. He hit Julia hard, knocking her to the ground, and kept telling the swordsman that he should avenge his brother's death. It was already clear that those people were trying to manipulate the guy. They wanted to settle injustice with an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But the swordsman said he was starting to suspect that his brother did something wrong, and that's why he got what he deserved. At that moment, Fred realized that the bald guy was extremely strong. He had probably already surpassed the true Qi realm. Julia knew that her younger brother was in the core Qi realm, which is slightly below the level of that bald guy, so the fight would be very difficult. But she started to feel something familiar. It was like she had met this guy before. When he released some of his power, he said he had been waiting for her for a long time. At that moment, the power he released reached Julia's stomach, activating the curse in her. The girl started to feel weak and began to tremble. That's when Fred solved the mystery. It was that bald monk who had cast the curse on his sixth older sister. The monk admitted it was him and even spoke with pride. But he didn't expect the curse to progress so quickly, leaving the girl debilitated. He had done it 5 years ago. The swordsman heard the whole conversation and began to realize that the Chen family's side was the evil one. Realizing that the situation was getting dangerous, Fred understood that he couldn't fight the monk in that place. First, he needed to get the snake and flee with his sister to try to heal her. However, the monk said he wouldn't let Frederico leave, and already charged at him using the fire fist technique. That technique was extremely powerful and destroyed the entire terrain around them. He really was at the Sea of Qi realm level, which was one level above our protagonist, and he even had the audacity to say he would eliminate Frederico and leave Julia alive to use her at night. Yes, to do exactly what you're thinking. Emanating his fire energy, he said the boy must die. He was very strong and started aiming his weapon at Fred. In the middle of that explosion, Fred managed to dodge the attack. He knew that guy was extremely powerful, so he threw his needles. Mockingly, the bald guy said those needles were nothing. But they were just a distraction so Fred could appear in front of him. The villain laughed, saying that high speed meant nothing. He said he was merciful, so he would give the young master a quick end. But our hero wasn't weak either. He managed to launch a technique into the bald guy's eye, making him lose his vision for a few seconds. That was enough for Fred to try to flee and get the snake's venom. He ran to the cage, but the swordsman was immobilizing the snake with his weapon. For a few minutes, he realized that Fred was a good guy, and that the Chen family was trying to manipulate him. Fred thought he would have to fight him, but the swordsman sheathed his sword and said he could take the snake's venom. Fred even thought it could be a trap, but he decided to believe it, since he had no other choice. He managed to gather all the snake's venom. The The creature even tried to attack him, but he pulled his arm back in time. With Julia leaning on his shoulder, he said he needed to escape with her to a safe place. She was very weak because of that curse on her yin-yang. The swordsman stood watching the two of them leave. The monk started yelling, asking where those bastards were, and the swordsman pointed in another direction just to buy them more time. Calling his henchmen, the monk shouted that they needed to chase after Federico, or he would escape. Now what the swordsman really wanted was to find out exactly how his brother died. He called for young Master Chen to show himself, and the guy broke his invisibility spell. The swordsman said he already knew his brother wasn't a good person, and told Chen to just say what really happened. He didn't believe his brother decided to work of his own free will for the Zhang family. The young master started making up a story, saying his brother joined the Zhang family out of self-interest. He said that in the past, a relative of the Zhang family was oppressed by Federico, and so his brother decided to take revenge. He added that his brother was also oppressed by him, so he joined forces with the Zhang family out of revenge. He also said that he didn't try to hurt the girl from the Yu family, and that all of that was a lie from Federico. The swordsman even laughed, but deep down he knew the guy was lying, and that his brother probably did some wrong things. He was already leaving, and Chen asked if he wasn't going to avenge his brother, since that would stain the name of the sword sect. The swordsman got furious and told him to shut up. He knew the guy only wanted to use his brother's death as an excuse to manipulate him, and said he wasn't going to fall for those traps anymore. If he were guided by the spirit of revenge, he would have the same fate as his brother. Besides that, the heavenly sword sect would be ruined. Admitting that his brother was wrong and suffered the consequences wasn't a sign of weakness. He even called out the monk, saying that someone like him who can't distinguish right from wrong shouldn't be practicing cultivation. Sheathing his sword again, he said he would investigate on his own to discover the full truth, and as he left he said that the matter was closed. Of course, the young master of the Chen family got angry, saying he didn't accept being abandoned like that. The bald guy commented that those self-proclaimed righteous ones were great masters too. The young Master Chen got all worked up, saying he couldn't believe the swordsman would abandon them like that. But the monk tried to calm him, saying that with him around, the boy wasn't going to escape. Master Chen believed in the bald guy's abilities and promised that if he captured the boy, he would receive double the reward. So the bald guy ran off to try and capture Fred. Right after, he called a contact from his family and said the hired swordsman was a complete failure, and that they should send the entire elite force of the Chen family. Our hero was escaping and in a tough situation, since reinforcements were coming. He was carrying Julia on his back and looking for a place to hide. After a few hours of walking, he found a cave. It was a very hidden place, so it seemed relatively safe. He whispered to Julia to stay calm, because he was going to save her. Now that he had the venom, he would make the necessary treatment for her. But meanwhile, she started having hallucinations, like curses trying to grab her. This made her start screaming in fear, begging for help. Fred beside her told the girl to calm down. What she was seeing was nothing more than hallucinations caused by the curse inside her yin-yang. She just needed to eat that antidote pill and she would be fine. But she didn't want to do that and slapped the pill, making it fly away. Fred realized that if that pill hit the ground, it would lose all its effect. So he jumped to try to protect it. He had already tried everything to get her to take the pill, so he put that bitter medicine sphere into his own mouth, and even apologized to his older sister. Then he kissed her on the mouth, passing the medicine from his mouth straight into the girl's mouth. With that, she managed to swallow the pill, and when she opened her eyes, she found our hero very close to her face. At that moment, all the essence of the antidote went to the yin-yang concentration and began to release the curse. He asked Julia to hang on because he was going to need to guide all that bad energy out of her body, and he did that using acupuncture techniques. He placed the needle in the exact point to eliminate all the evil energy. After a few minutes, it started to work and she regained a superficial layer of defense. However, unfortunately for him, the Chen family's henchmen ended up finding them. They were discovered very quickly, and all of that because of that shameless monk who managed to track the yin-yang energy of the curse. But the entrance to the cave was narrow, so they could get stuck inside. That's why the monk ordered them to set fire to the cave entrance, forcing Fred to come out. If they didn't come out, they would be suffocated by the smoke. The people began praising the monk, saying he was brilliant and very smart. Don't ask me how, but they already had gasoline cans and started pouring it all over the entrance. Right after, the monk ordered them to set it on fire. And that's exactly what they did. The fire began to spread very quickly. In a few seconds, the entire entrance of the cave was in flames. He wanted to see how long the disciples of the Seven Sages could hold on. Fred realized the situation was critical because there was only one way out. Julia starts breathing that smoke and her cheeks turn red. 30 seconds breathing that smoke was fatal, and he knew it. Because of that, he needed to act fast. He takes a cloth from his bag and wets it in a stream that ran through the cave. Then he puts it on the girl's nose to act as a filter. It wouldn't last long, but it would give a few more seconds. She wouldn't be able to move for at least 15 minutes, so he would have to carry her in his arms. At that moment, he needed to remember all the Taoist techniques his masters had taught him. The seventh master had taught that he could break his first seals to release a powerful attack. He demonstrated it using an axe and said that with common techniques, it wasn't even possible to break a log. But when using concentration energy, the attack could be 10 times stronger. However, for that, he would need to break one of the seals. He had already broken the first with the help of the seventh sister, and the next seal was with Julia. And he knew exactly where she had hidden the artifact. He needed to get it. He even apologized, saying it was for a good cause. After a while, he had the seal in his hands and needed to break that barrier inside his body. If he took too long, he would end up suffocated by the smoke. Outside, the shameless monk was blowing the fire, making everything even hotter. That blow was raising the temperature inside the cave. The guy even said that Frederico seemed kind of weak and wouldn't survive. But inside, our hero was breaking the sixth seal. He put his hands together and began to release his cultivation form. Outside, the henchmen even celebrated, saying the only way for Fred to come out alive would be by using a water dragon. But they said that was impossible. Even the monk said that. That was when he felt a small earthquake. And also heard a very loud noise coming from inside the cave. What came out of there was precisely a water dragon. The bald guy couldn't believe it and said that was impossible. And he also couldn't imagine where all that water came from. Our hero began to flood that entire forest. It was endless water. He was in there, managing to extinguish all those flames. This was an advanced technique from the peak of the sea realm. You're going to see how our protagonist becomes a total beast from now on. He managed to put out all the fire, and was controlling the water dragon to eliminate his enemies. That was the water dragon hexagram. And he ordered the dragon to return to his body. And that's exactly what happens. The water creature returns to our hero as a cultivation base. Carrying Julia in his arms, he says he's going to escape from there using those water currents. The people start calling for help as they drown, but our hero could breathe calmly down there. The other thugs were screaming for help, desperate. And our protagonist, he didn't care at all. The guys had just tried to kill him and now they were there begging for help. However, that wasn't good because Julia was unconscious and couldn't hold her breath. Realizing that the boy was going to surface, the bald guy already prepared to attack him, and said he was going to use his strongest technique to make sure he didn't survive. Our hero couldn't do anything, since he was in a disadvantageous position, but someone appeared to protect him. It was precisely that swordsman who was suspecting that the Chen family was the true culprit of all the evil. The monk asked the swordsman if now he decided to become a traitor, and ensuring Fred's safety, he tells the boy to flee quickly. Our hero thanks him for saving his life, and after a while he manages to climb up the stream, taking Julia to a safe place. He leaves her by the riverbank and says she will wake up in 10 minutes, but then he remembers that she couldn't hold her breath, which is why her belly was full of water, so he uses a cultivation technique to remove all the water from inside her. And so, she starts breathing calmly again. Since she had drunk a lot of water, she wouldn't wake up in 10 minutes, but in 15. Then he realizes he needs to go back to help the swordsman, or else he would be defeated by the bald monk. The scene goes back to the battle, and we see that the monk was really beating the swordsman. He wasn't managing to honor the sect of the heavenly swords, and the monk was even mocking him. At that moment, 3 needles fly toward the bald guy. He screams because he realizes it was a surprise attack, but since he was really tough, he managed to defend against the needles. Fred launches another water attack, but the bald guy also manages to block it. He's surprised because it seems that Frederico got much stronger. 3 needles stick into the ground, and he was faster because he managed to unlock the 6th seal. Now it was time to settle the score. The cool thing about this protagonist is that he's not as soft as the others. If he needs to send someone to the grave, he will. In an instant, those needles hit the ground and the bald guy doesn't notice the speed. His plan was to grab the swordsman as a hostage, to use as a bargaining chip in the fight, so he goes all out toward the boy. Our hero knows the monk's sneaky techniques very well and steps in front to protect the swordsman. In response, the bald guy says that a stinky fan like him could never defeat him, but our hero thinks differently. Launching more water jets, the bald guy manages to block with ease, but that was just a distraction. The real powerful attack was coming. The attack is so strong that the bald guy can't block it, no matter how hard he tries. He ends up being hit hard in the chest. In a lot of pain, he asks if Fred managed to reach the Sea of Key Realm, and if he did that inside the cave. With a sphere of energy in his hands, Frederico says he only recovered a bit of his power, and that now it was time to finish the Chen family. Someone appears telling them not to move. And the one who was there was the real leader of the Chen family, that boy's father. This was the backup they had called. He starts laughing, saying that the sect of the 7 Masters always made a fool of itself, and this time would be no different. Besides that, he says he was now closer to getting revenge on that witch. Our hero asks which witch he's talking about, if he means his 6th master. That's exactly it. He had an old grudge with our hero's 6th master. He says that about 20 years ago he tried to take advantage of a girl, and we see the girl wasn't really into it. But the master showed up and told him to stop that. When she touched his shoulder, she blocked his cultivation. Since then, he couldn't level up anymore and got stuck in the sea realm. Because of that, he cursed Julia to get revenge on her master, and wanted to do the same with Fred. Upon hearing this, our hero gets furious and lands a blow on this maniac. He wasn't going to let this guy get away with everything he did. His hand goes through the bald guy's chest, and he even says the man should thank the kindness of the 6th master for not taking his life back then. The Chen clan leader is shocked and orders all his henchmen to shoot the boy. They start firing multiple shots and Fred throws some needles. With great speed, he dodges all the attacks and throws more and more needles. All those metal objects start hitting the henchmen, and little by little they start falling. The only one still standing was the Chen clan leader, but he also ends up getting hit in the neck. He falls to the ground in pain as he was getting electrocuted. Fred walks slowly toward him, while the guy begs for help. In response, Fred says he hit a vital point on those bastards and they won't survive. The Chen family boss had lost his life and no one could believe it. With confidence, Fred says that if the other henchmen also want to die, they just need to stay in the forest. They disagree, saying they would rather stay alive and start fleeing the place. He goes to the swordsman and asks if he's okay. He uses a medicinal and cultivation technique to try to restore his vital points. This causes the guy terrible pain, but it was for his own good. Right after, he asks if that was enough for him to feel better. The guy agrees, saying yes, and that he won't die. At that moment, the swordsman realizes Fred was very strong, because he dodged multiple bullets and still defeated that monk. He thanks Fred for saving him and says he'll try to better understand who his brother really was, since it seemed like they didn't even know each other. The story was very long, but if he wanted, Fred could tell it. Meanwhile, the other henchmen were looking for Julia. The young master knew she had hidden in that place because they were sensing her aura. However, they ended up hearing the sound of gunfire from when his father had arrived. They think that probably his father came and defeated Frederico. Touching one of his men on the shoulder, he says that if they find Julia, he'll give a reward of $5 million. At that moment, they end up finding the girl lying near the stream. They start saying they should grab her quickly. The young master orders everyone to surround her so she can't escape. They even make disgusting comments, saying she had a nice body and that they could all take advantage of her later. They even say it would be fun to take turns. These guys here are worthless, folks. When they were about to touch Julia, they hear a sound. It was several needles hitting them. We already know those needles are Frederico's, and he really was there, asking how they dared touch his 6th elder sister. He guarantees that he won't forgive them. All of them would die. Young Master Chen is already starting to panic and asks where the bald monk is. At that moment, he realizes that even his father might no longer be alive, and orders his henchmen to shoot Frederico. They draw their guns and start firing, but they can't hit him. Even with several shots, they hit nothing. That's because our hero was moving at the speed of light. They even say this boy looked like a superhuman. They couldn't even track him with their eyes. He looked more like a ghost. And before they knew it, all of them had been defeated, with only the boy left standing. He starts running away, saying he'll return to the Chen family where he'll be safe. But it was already too late. He ends up getting stabbed in the back by a needle that delivers a strong electric shock. Falling to the ground, he asks why his body wasn't moving. But all the other henchmen were also paralyzed. It seemed their bodies weren't responding to their brains. In response, Fred says that the Zhang family also messed with him and was destroyed. And now it was the Chen family's turn. He wouldn't let anyone who harmed his sisters go unpunished. The guy starts begging for forgiveness and swears he'll give Fred all the money he wants. His family was billionaire and had a huge fortune, so he could offer any amount. That proposal seemed great, but our protagonist wasn't interested. He laughs and says that fame and money weren't of any interest to him. He refuses the offer. He says this after throwing a needle into the villain's chest, and now that he had eliminated all the members of the Chen family, he says he will go back to his sister Julia. He goes there, picks up the girl, and holds her in his arms to return to the city. He tells her that the matter is settled, and that now she no longer has a curse blocking her yin-yang. They could return home safely. She wakes up in his arms, thinking it was very good to have a man she could trust. They head back to the city's airport. The little swordsman heard the whole story from Fred's mouth and began to believe what he told. He even apologized for his brother causing so many problems. Julia comments that this guy was quite an upright person, and that it was good to meet him. She says that since he practiced martial arts, he needed first to cultivate the mind. The body was just a consequence. Julia asks if that was what the 7 masters taught him, that he should train the mind first. He answers yes, that was the main thing, but they also taught other things. And she wants to know what else they taught. He says the masters taught him that he should have many wives and concubines and form a family full of children and grandchildren. She gets angry right away, asking which shameless master told him that, and he admits he was joking, but the 6th sister gets really mad. In the middle of the trip, Julia gets thoughtful. She says that now that the Chen family was destroyed, Fred would need to warn the Yu family. He says he hasn't done that yet and asks why he would have to do it so quickly. She explains that it's so the Yu family can go there and absorb the Chen family's assets. Otherwise, the Zhang family would do it and become even stronger. Besides that, his path would be easier without those families interfering, but our protagonist didn't quite understand. So she explains that since he is powerful in helping the Yu family, the other families will end up suspecting that he is trying to bring down the other houses. The guy is shocked, right? Would everyone think he's an enemy? And that's exactly it. That's why he should make the Yu family, his allied family, even stronger. She also explains that the 5th sister was in the possession of the Vangyue family. Guys, this is news! The next one he needs to find is precisely the 5th sister. The scene changes to Alice. Her phone was ringing. She gets excited because it was a call from Fred. She tells her friend she needs to leave early because she has an urgent matter to resolve. The friend asks why she's skipping class since she's never done that before. Ah, girl, because it was a call from Fred, right? The boy she loves. She's already running off, talking to him on the phone, and we see a blonde guy watching everything. That guy heard Alice saying Frederico's name. And he was the youngest son of the Vangi family, destined to marry her. Upon hearing the name Frederico, he gets thoughtful, since he had heard that name somewhere. His friends comment if this Frederico wasn't the guy who destroyed the Zhang family a few days ago. Then he understands everything. Alice was getting involved with this Fred, and he was behind the fall of some important houses. Wanting to know the relationship between her and this boy, he decides to follow her. He wanted to discover who this Frederico was that was making the Yu family feel so important. The scene changes to a restaurant. They were having a snack, and our protagonist was starving. She wanted to know why he called her so urgently. He was even starting to forget what he had to say because of the burger. Then he reveals that she must tell her grandfather that the Chen family has fallen, and that they should absorb all the family's assets. The girl doesn't believe it much, since the Chen family was the 4th largest in the city, so it wouldn't be easy for them to fall like that. He tells her to stop doubting, because he himself already took care of all the Chen family members. They fell because they messed with the 5th sister. Startled, Alice asks if that's serious, if he's not joking. And it was very serious, and they needed to act fast to get all the assets, or else the Vangue family would arrive first. She already decides to call her grandfather to tell everything. Now that the message was delivered, he was about to leave because he was tired from the trip. She gets sad, poor thing, asking if he really is leaving already. But then he remembers he had one more thing to say. He says he had an important question to ask. The girl gets all excited thinking he was going to ask her out, but what he wanted to know was if she would accept to be his disciple. This surprises Alice, and the young man from the Vangue family was there in the back, watching everything. He was spying to know what the relationship between the two was. She starts pinching Fred's cheeks, asking what's this story about wanting a disciple. The guy's friends ask if the young master wants them to go there and teach that boy a lesson, but doing that in front of Alice wouldn't look good. When Fred was saying goodbye to leave, the young Vangue orders his henchmen to follow him, and that's exactly what they do. He also says that if Fred is weak, they can eliminate him. Fred and Alice leave down the street, playfully teasing each other. She notices he has dark circles and asks if he's not sleeping well. He says he's a light sleeper and didn't manage to rest. Worried, she asks if he wants her to give him a ride by car. That way he would get home faster. He thanks her, saying she's very kind, but says he'll run anyway because he needs to exercise. It was just an excuse, then he says goodbye. He gets on a bus and thinks he couldn't let her give him a ride because Julia was at his house. She was sleeping in his bed, and if Alice found the girl there, the situation would get awkward. Alice notices he's making an excuse and wonders what he's hiding. But at the same time, she gets worried because he managed to handle the Chen family alone, and she knew those people were very dangerous. She manages to call her grandfather and explains everything. He's surprised by the idea of annexing the Chen family, and even asks if his granddaughter is crazy. Then she explains that Federico managed to defeat all the masters. After stopping at the bus stop, Fred leaves running. He was really tired because he hadn't slept well. But near his house, he ends up finding the gang of that guy from the Vangue family. They had surrounded our hero, and the old people on the street ran away scared. Quite calmly, Fred asked who they were, but the guys didn't want to know anything and went after Fred. These guys didn't even have any cultivation base and thought they could beat our hero. In a few seconds, all of them had been defeated. Fred was stepping on one of them, asking who had sent them. And they admitted, saying it was someone very important. The chubby guy didn't know the name, only that it was someone rich. Fred starts punching him more, saying if he doesn't say that person's name soon, he'll finish all his teeth. All toothless, the guy says he really doesn't know the name. He could even die, but didn't want to name someone he didn't even know. Realizing the chubby guy was telling the truth, he decides to let him live, and orders everyone to get out of there quickly. They start running to try to get to safety. Now Fred begins to believe what Julia said, about him attracting the attention of other families. He even imagines it was probably the Vangue family, spying on him from afar, and they end up sending messages saying Federico was very strong. The scene changes to a little later that same day. The guy was in a restaurant looking at messages on his phone. He received a video where Fred had beaten all his henchmen, and he even said he was going to leave that matter for his father or aunt to solve. One of the friends says this Federico was very strong, and it was strange he had allied with the Yu family. He also wanted to know what he would do from now on. The blonde guy was calm, because the Vangue family had many cultivation experts, just like this boy. Even if Alice liked that Federico, the Yu family wouldn't let the two stay together. The blonde guy agrees, saying he already has an arranged marriage with her, and that it would be much more beneficial for the girl's family if she married him. The Vangue family was very powerful because they had a relic kept under 7 locks. It was something extremely powerful. After finishing the conversation, he says they need to leave quickly. And we see that the guy who was serving at the bar was the one from the beginning of the story. He paid attention to the whole conversation, and he says he saw Fred's photo on the blonde guy's phone. So he goes to our hero's house to tell him all this, but Fred wasn't paying much attention. Still, the guy guarantees that those from the Vangue family want to harm him. He told everything because he wanted to learn some cultivation techniques from our protagonist. After everything happens, Fred tells him to leave, and even asks if he knows the names of those 2 people he saw at the bar. The guy says he doesn't know because they were very discreet, but they seem to be from the Vangue family. Our hero thanks him and he leaves. He knew it was that family forcing Alice to marry them. The scene changes to Alice's house, and she was talking to her grandfather. Annexing the Chen family's assets would need to be done strategically. She asks if sending only her uncle along with some men would be enough. Grandpa says no, but that he wasn't that worried. But Alice didn't need to worry because her father went along too. She was surprised, asking if that was serious. Later they had returned. This was the current leader of the Yu family. His name was Charles, father of Lise. She was very anxious, asking if everything went well. She even offered him some tea. Her father asked if everything went as expected, and if they managed to settle matters with the Chen family. Charles says yes, and that they managed to acquire all the family's assets, and that when they arrived there, they decided to cooperate. All this was thanks to Federico. He he was helping the Yu family get stronger and stronger. Alice tells her father that Fred was very helpful, and that he was bringing many resources, that they wouldn't even need to submit to the Vanguet family anymore. The girl's grandfather was helping her highlight Fred, more so that her father would cancel the marriage with the Vanguet family. But Charles says things are not as simple as she thinks. The Yu family was already the third largest in the city, so she didn't need to marry the Vanguet family since she didn't want that. She says it would be a nightmare. And besides that, they managed to annex 2 more families. The girl's father gets angry, slams his glass on the table and calls her naive, and asks her to bring Federico home the next day because he wants to meet the boy. She gets all happy, asking if by any chance her father changed his mind. In response, Charles says the boy did a great favor for his family, so he wants to thank him personally. The poor girl gets excited, thinking her father will let her marry Fred. After that, he leaves. The grandfather feels a bit uneasy, knowing Charles was hard to deal with, and that he didn't change his mind easily. Later, our protagonist was sleeping, and his phone started ringing. He decides to answer. He was half asleep and didn't understand very well. Alice starts repeating, saying her father wants to meet Fred. The scene changes to the next morning, and Fred was a bit thoughtful. Julia asks why he's so worried so early. He says it's because Alice's father wants to see him. Trying to calm him down, the 6th sister says he probably just wants to thank Fred, since he managed to defeat 2 families that were enemies of the Yu family. And to make things worse, she says the Vanguet family decided to cause trouble with him. And Julia was right about those families trying to eliminate him. She asks if he still hasn't understood how the world works. Even the 7th sister said Fred was quite a wild guy. That was clearly a joke from Aang's sister, but Julia didn't get it. So she tries to motivate Fred, saying he is very strong and no matter what happens. He always has a card up his sleeve. And besides, if he joined the Yu family, it would be very good, since they need to establish the new sect of the 7 Masters in the city. At that moment, someone honks outside. It was Alice there to pick up our hero. He gets worried, peeking out the window with his sister Julia. Alice gets very jealous, asking who that girl was. He says goodbye to his sister and says he's already going. The 6th sister notices Julia got jealous, and already knew Julia misunderstood things. However, maybe she wasn't that wrong in what she understood, since she had kissed Fred and was even carried in his arms. He gets in the car and puts on the seatbelt. Alice starts to speed up, and she does that because she was angry. An old man even starts yelling, telling her to watch where she's going. Very jealous, Alice asks who that girl in his room was. And besides, she was there very early, which meant they slept together. Sweating nervously, Fred says that was his 6th older sister, and it was exactly because of her that he had been missing those days, since he was looking for medical treatment for her. That makes Alice embarrassed, her cheeks blushing. She had misunderstood everything. Then he asks why her father wanted to see him today. In response, Alice says it's because her father wants to thank him, since he was helping the Yu family a lot, and that if her father liked Fred, she wouldn't have to marry someone from the Vanguet family anymore. Our hero beside her already understood the girl's motivations perfectly. Finally, they arrive at the Yu family mansion. Charles starts thanking Fred for helping eliminate some families that were in their way, and even admits our hero seems to be quite a promising person. Alice starts wondering if by chance her father noticed Fred's potential and wanted to offer her in marriage to the boy. But soon he says he wouldn't want Federico to keep meeting his daughter. That surprises everyone. And it was nothing like what the girl was imagining. She says Fred could be very good for the family since he's very strong. But Charles says Alice already has a marriage contract with the youngest son of the Vanguet family, and they couldn't dishonor that commitment. Before going to the Yu family house, our protagonist already imagined he would say something like that. Alice tells her father she doesn't want to marry someone from the Vanguet family, but he tells his daughter to shut up and says it's none of her business, and even asks if Fred could do him the favor of never seeing his daughter again. In response, Fred says he understands very well that Charles is looking for the best options for the family, and the guy interrupts Fred saying he knows he is smart, and so he will fulfill the request. Alice starts screaming, saying that in her father's eyes, marriage is the only thing that matters, and that he doesn't care about her feelings. He tells the girl to go back to her room right away, and even asks the guards to accompany the girl, but she says she will go up alone. She apologizes to Fred for always causing problems for him, and our protagonist in a very calm way tells her not to worry about that. Fred stands up and tells Charles that he likes Alice very much and that she is a great friend, and that he can't fulfill that request of his. Charles didn't expect him to react that way, so he makes a proposal if Fred agrees to never have contact with his daughter again, he will get 30% of the Chen family's assets. But money, fame, and status were not things Federico wanted. So much so that he left all the Chen and Zhang family assets precisely with this guy. Besides, power and wealth were things that made people obsessed, and sometimes people get so blinded by that they are capable of using their own family as a bargaining chip. After saying that, Charles is a little shaken but still doesn't change his mind. The grandfather goes to our hero to talk with him. The boy asks if the old man also came to ask him to stay away from Alice, but the grandfather is a bit wiser and says he won't do that since he has always valued the family's happiness. Fred asks what he means by that, and the old man admits that when he was younger he also didn't marry the right person. He made some wrong decisions, and even though he became very rich and powerful, he regretted it for the rest of his life. He knew Alice had great potential for cultivation, and that if she trained she could become a great master. The old man says that if Fred likes someone, he has to go after her, and that no matter the nonsense that happens along the way, he shouldn't give up on who he likes. Fred feels a bit embarrassed and says the grandfather is thinking wrong about him. Our hero didn't necessarily want to marry Lise. He was more interested in making her his disciple, and wanted her to become one of the masters of his clan. But he ends up thanking the old man for the advice. As he is leaving, the old man thinks that his son Charles can't recognize Fred's potential. He even has more potential than all the members of the Vang family. The scene changes to the Vang family, which had a huge mansion. There was the family leader together with his sister. The head of the Vang family was called Chalkin, and his son, the blonde boy, was telling the whole story about Fred, saying he was very dangerous and on top of that was involved with Lise. The man gets indignant, asking if Frederico is really in the Bardic realm. He even thinks the Yu family is kind of undecided, not knowing whether to marry Alice to the blonde boy or to Fred. And once they get in the way of the Vang family, there's no turning back. His aunt laughs, saying the Yu family has always been stupid, and he thanks her, saying his nephew finally brought important information. Since the Yu family is undecided, they need to take the initiative, and says he will meet personally with the family leader tomorrow. The aunt says the Yu family isn't that important anyway, so she would go there herself. The leader agrees. The scene changes to Jiang's house, and she was talking to Julia. She was saying Fred will face the Vang family soon, and they needed to be prepared. She didn't expect her little brother to mature so fast, and was already imagining how he would deal with the betrayal of the fifth sister. Julia says the fifth sister can no longer be called a sister because she is not worthy, having betrayed the clan. Besides, she was helping the Vang family, which was a villainous family. They would have to tell Fred about this, but it would be complicated because they didn't know how he would react. Julia says Jiang is the youngest sister, so she should be in charge of that. But Jiang uses the same argument, saying Julia is older. They kept passing the responsibility back and forth. Finally, the day of the meeting between the Yu family and the Vang family arrived. They had received an invitation saying the meeting would be about Alice's marriage to Chu. They clearly wanted to discuss this as soon as possible. The head of martial arts of the Yu family said sending that invitation seemed quite rude. However, Charles said they needed the Vang family as allies. Later, our protagonist receives a call from Alice asking to meet in a garden, and he runs there desperately. He asks her what happened, since she said it was an emergency. She found out that tomorrow there will be a meeting where her father will set the date for her marriage with the Vangier family member. Fred asks what she thinks about that, and the poor girl starts crying, saying she doesn't want it, that she'd rather die than marry that boy. In response, Fred says it's no use crying and wanting to die. They need to think of an alternative to get out of that situation. The Vangier family was pressuring her family a lot, so there wasn't much to do. Not even her grandfather could help her. Fred says he doesn't have a plan yet, but will think of something. The Vangyu family was extremely powerful, even having its own martial arts clan called the Golden Blades clan. He had heard that this family was very dangerous and also had strong members. However, his clan, the Seven Sages clan, would not submit to anyone. He wanted to found his own clan and first needed to destroy those enemy clans that in the future would try to interfere. So basically he would be helping Alice, but also because of his own interests. She agrees with that, even mentioning that Fred is a little different, seems to have more attitude now. He says people change, and that was thanks to his maturation. The boy's phone rings, and it was the sixth older sister. He answers and she says she has something important to talk to him about and needs him to come to her house. Fred asks if she can't say it on the phone, but she just hangs up. That makes him a bit angry because she hung up on him. He tells Alice he has something important to solve and that she needs to trust him and not act recklessly. But the meeting would be tomorrow, and she hesitates if she should do something. He says no. She should just stay quiet and wait. Stay calm, observe, and then act at the right time. She thinks about that and finds him charming. He even seemed like a sage speaking those things. He arrives at Zhang's house, and Zhang herself answers the door. She gets embarrassed and warns that the two sisters had very serious looks. It seems they were going to tell something super secret, and our protagonist already starts sweating nervously. Stammering, he asks what the two sisters would like to talk to him about. They look at each other, saying that each will say a part as they had agreed. And that way, they start telling about the fifth sister and ask if he knows anything about her. What he knew was only what Julia said, that the fifth sister was at the Vangier family's house. Then Jiang asks if by any chance he knows why the fifth sister is at that family's house. Julia hadn't said that before, but the fifth sister betrayed the sect of the sages. Our hero gets confused. What do you mean we have a traitor among our sisters? But that's exactly what happened. She betrayed the sect and joined the Vangier family. Fred doesn't believe it. He thinks something must have happened for her to change sides. But the two confirm, saying she is even considered an honored guest and very well treated within the family. That's because she uses cultivation martial arts to refine strengthening pills. And that is a very serious betrayal because it is extremely forbidden for a master to refine pills for outsiders who are not part of cultivation. He gets upset and even punches the table. He gets indignant, saying the fifth sister would never do such a thing, break such an important rule and still help people with bad intentions. Julia is a bit surprised and thinks they said that at the wrong time. However, Zhang says it was better to tell the truth right away. Now, Fred says he has one more reason to confront the Vangier family. Julia asks if she heard right, if he really wants to go against this family, since they are the second most powerful in the city. That's exactly what she heard. He will defeat the Vangier family, take the only heir of the Yu family, and make her his disciple. That's because this family is forcing Alice to marry them, and he won't let that happen. Besides that, he believes the fifth sister was deceived, and they are holding her hostage. Julia and Jeong say that's not true, that the fifth sister chose to betray on her own will. However, nothing gets Fred out of his head that she was deceived, and he even says he will use all the power he can get to build an even stronger sect. His goal now is to make the Yu family the most influential, and thus use that power to create a powerful sect. Jang thinks this idea is great, because the influence of a rich family would be essential for strengthening a cultivation sect. Julie even asks when Fred got so smart, and he feels embarrassed. Diana, who is arriving from afar, watches them talking. She even imagines this topic is important, since they all look serious. The scene changes to the Yu family mansion. Who went there to talk about the wedding date was the aunt, not the family leader. The grandfather, who was the former leader, goes to receive her and says Charles had been waiting for her for quite some time. But the woman treats Grandpa Yu very arrogantly, as if he were a simple servant. This makes all the Yu family members outraged, saying this woman is very disrespectful. Meanwhile, Fred goes to the Vangyue mansion headquarters. He wanted to investigate a bit more about the fifth sister, to know if she really was a traitor or if she was being deceived. However, the mansion was huge, one of the biggest territories in the city, so it would be almost impossible to find her. And to make it worse, he didn't even know what the fifth sister looked like. He could only count on his cultivation perception and try to identify where her aura came from. One of the family leaders was walking through the pavilions and ends up knocking on the door. A woman receives him saying that the young lady was resting. This was the Vangyue family leader, and he wanted to talk to this woman. It was the first day of work for this employee, and he asks who lives in that house. The older employee warns the new guy not to ask questions, or he might end up dead. The maid goes there to talk to her lady and says the family leader is outside wanting to talk to her. It seemed that if she didn't answer him, he would wait there as long as necessary. This was the fifth symbol of the sect of the sages, and her name was Lan Lan. And the girl responds to leave him waiting a bit longer. Yeah, guys, is she really a traitor? Keep watching to find out. The maid goes there and helps Lan Lan get up, but she says she doesn't need it. We see that Lan Lan was actually blind and she didn't know where her servant was, while the girl in the background keeps saying that the family leader is waiting for her. She wants to know why the family leader came to visit her today, which is an important moment since they are discussing the wedding. The helper says she doesn't know anything about that. Probably he wanted more pills to make his family even stronger. And she keeps saying she can't make so many pills, but the helper gets all excited, saying if they are there on such an important day, it means Lan Lan is even more important to them. In response, the girl says she already paid the favor that the Vangyue family did for her, so she doesn't need to keep repaying for so long. She admits she feels like a bird trapped in a cage and that she shouldn't stay in that place. Deep down, she knew she had dishonored the sect of the Seven Sages and couldn't return home, and in the end, her fate was to be locked in that place forever. At that moment, she feels an aura entering the room, and that aura was familiar. She knew it came from the sect of the Seven Sages. She even wonders if some sister came there to rescue her. She asks her maid to send the family leader away, saying she wasn't feeling well. The girl agrees and goes there. Meanwhile, Lan Lan tries to sense where that aura was coming from. Since she had lost her sight, her other senses became much sharper. But she starts getting tense, imagining it might be some master coming to eliminate her since she betrayed the sect. We see that the one emanating that aura was actually Fred because he was lost and didn't know where to go. At that moment, he ended up being found by some employees. He had to finish them off so he wouldn't be discovered. Fred, who was very angry, starts shooting needles in every direction. Now that he got rid of those guys, he should follow the aura that was being emanated back. He knew that if the fifth sister was really found, she would also release some mana into the air. He was afraid she wouldn't sense his energy properly, so he started releasing a bit more spiritual aura around. After feeling her energy, he started jumping from roof to roof. He did this passing by several buildings. The family leader says he came to deal with urgent matters, but the helper says Lan Lan wasn't feeling well. The guy agrees to come back tomorrow, telling Lan Lan to lie down and recover her energy. However, he begins to suspect since the situation in the city was turbulent. He imagines Lan Lan must be plotting something. At that moment, she was inside, emanating her energy, wanting to be found by the disciples of the Seven Masters. Our hero finds her and enters through the window. He loudly asks if she is the fifth elder sister. She realizes it is a male voice, but he called her elder sister, so she starts remembering Fred when he was very little. She asks if by any chance he is Fred Ming. He says yes, and starts waving his hand in front of her. He realizes she is blind. The guy says again that he is Fred Ming and asks if she lost her sight. She says she became blind and is not worthy to be a disciple of the Seven Masters. Therefore, she is no longer his fifth elder sister. She doesn't have that right. The guy gets curious, asking what happened to her, why she was in that situation. In response, she says that because of her lack of skill, she ended up embarrassing and disappointing her masters. She says this while stepping back and ends up stumbling. She was about to fall hard because she couldn't see well where she was. Fred realizes she's going to get hurt, so he runs and manages to hold Lan Lan, protecting the girl. She remembers when he was very little and took care of her. In response, Fred says he came looking for her. The sixth and seventh elder sisters said she had betrayed the sect of the Seven Sages. The girl is left speechless and seems very nervous. At that moment, someone kicks the door open. He senses an unknown aura in the place. He suspects someone invaded the Vangyue family house. The girl says he misunderstood, that this boy is not an invader. He steps in front of the fifth elder sister and tells her to stay calm, because he will protect her. However, this guy is super powerful. He activates his cultivation energy and manages to block the Vangyue family leader's attack. The guy asks, a little crazy, if this boy thinks he can block his attacks with just one hand, and he already tries to go for another attack. From afar, Lanlan asks her brother, but the Nozeroi doesn't complicate things. He even says he wouldn't be able to defeat the Vangyue master. Out of consideration for Lanlan, the master says he will let him leave alive, but he needs to leave immediately. He tries to take his sister with him, telling her to follow him. However, she withdraws her arm, saying the Vangyue master was very good to her, so she couldn't abandon them. Besides, she betrayed the sect of the Seven Sages. A little nervous, she asks Federico to leave. When he passes by her side, he whispers softly in her ear that he will come back later to rescue her. No matter what happens, the sect of the Seven Sages will always be her home. The guy leaves, leaving the girl thoughtful. She even gets teary-eyed, thinking she was not abandoned. The guy thinks Federico's attitude was quite reckless, because he invaded the Vangyue family house and even fought the leader. She thanks the Vangyue leader for his concern. But deep down, she was really worried about Federico. Before leaving, he asks the maid to notify him when the master comes. Going outside, the guy starts spitting red liquid. We see that he suffered a lot in that battle against Fred. The scene changes to Jiang's house, and Diana realizes someone is knocking on the door. Who is there on the other side is Fred, and he is almost dying. That battle caused a lot of damage to his meridians. He already starts spitting red liquid. Admitting it, that guy is very skilled. Diana, very worried, asks what happened. He says it's nothing, he just needs to lie down and recover his energy. Jiang appears and asks who fought against him. Admitting he invaded the Vangyue family house, he says he fought against their leader. Rui keeps saying that this is very reckless since he went head-to-head against a martial master. The goal was not to battle that guy, but to see the fifth elder sister. The seventh sister asks why he went after that traitor. He says he felt the fifth sister had some secret she didn't want to tell. And by the way, he asks if Jiang knew that Lanlan had gone blind. She didn't know that and asks if it's true, if she really lost her sight. The only thing she knew is that Lanlan violated the sect's prohibitions and helped strangers, and she didn't know anything else. However, Fred felt she was isolated and that something was wrong. The meeting between the Vangyue family and the Yu family was happening, and he would need to act if he wanted to stop this marriage. In response, Fred says it would be wiser to keep watching and wait for the right moment to act, because he didn't want to anger the Yu family. The scene shifts back to that mansion, and we see Grandpa being humiliated by a woman. She kept saying their house was very poor and didn't even have spittoons. In response, Grandpa says the family wasn't extravagant, and thought more about the happiness of its members. The aunt replies that being extravagant depends on how much you can afford. The other family members get irritated, saying this woman is very arrogant and disrespecting the family. Charles tells everyone to shut up and treat her well. He greatly admired the Vangyue family's fame and wanted his daughter to marry their nephew. Arrogantly, she says she won't even enter his house, just came to say the wedding will happen on the 7th. She only brought this notification and was already leaving. The big guy says this is very rude, and it should be something the two families organize. The woman asks if the big guy has already reached the peak of the true cultivation realm. He replies they are not there to talk about cultivation, but about a wedding. The woman feels disrespected and attacks the big guy, choking him. Everyone asks her to let the guy go, but she ignores them. She says the Vangyue family has only one male nephew descendant, and marrying him to the Yu family's daughter is a great honor for them. Now the matter is decided and should not be questioned. She slams the door and leaves. Grandpa asks the guy if he is okay, and they say this woman is very aggressive and doesn't respect the Yu family. Besides, they already disrespected them even before the wedding happened. They imagine what they would do after the wedding. Charles's brother says the big guy was wrong. In the debate, they discuss whether they should have the Vangyue family as allies, since they want to be first in the ranking. The big guy tells him to shut up, because when Alice marries that guy, the Yu family will be kicked out. And so the argument starts. Charles tells everyone to be quiet, and Grandpa asks his son's opinion about it. The guy thinks, but we see he's not that wise. He says he will act as planned and marry Alice to the Vangyue family's son. This will happen in a week. The other members start disagreeing, saying he's putting his own biological daughter to be humiliated by that horrible family. Alice was in her room and learned everything from a maid. She thanks the woman for telling the whole story and says she can leave. It would be very hard for her to stay calm and wait for the right moment, as Fred mentioned, but she would believe and trust him. On the other hand, Federico is thinking about the tactics the Vangyue family used to deceive Lanlan for so many years. At that moment, his phone rings. He calls Alice, telling her everything that happened in the meeting with her father. He hasn't thought of a more guaranteed solution for her yet, but says everything will work out. Jiang called Julia, and the girl asked what happened. She needed to tell what happened with the fifth elder sister. Julia knew Fred went there alone and asked if something dangerous happened. Jiang says it wasn't just minor injuries, but something Julia didn't know. Here in Terma, Lanlan became blind. Julia is shocked, as she didn't know that either. She asks who did that to Lanlan. Jiang didn't know, but said Fred thinks she's being kept hostage, and that actually she didn't betray the sect of the Seven Sages. Julia is shocked and says they need to find out the whole truth. Julia wanted to confront the Vangyue family, but Jiang says they don't have enough strength for that. Very angry, Julia questions what they are going to do. Just stand by and watch one of their sisters suffer at the hands of criminals? Fred appears and tells them not to act on impulse because he has a plan. They could get support from the family that is #1 in the city ranking. They doubt who he is talking about. He shows the home and says the #1 family is the Kumen family. This family has been first in the city, ranking as the most powerful for many generations. Jang says they stayed on top because of the family's intelligence, and also because the former leader was very powerful. So our protagonist wants to go there and schedule a meeting, since it interests the Kumen family to weaken the Vangue family. Jiang agrees and says she will go with him. Inside the car, they think about what kind of bargaining chip they will offer for the Kumen family to help them. Fred already has a plan in mind, and hopes they don't get worried. They arrive at the Kumen family entrance and see the guys are very rich. An employee tells them not to stop there, because the area is forbidden. Our hero lowers the window and says his name is Federico, and would like a visit with the leader. The employee says he has never heard that name and won't be able to call his master talking about this Federico. Then Zhang appears and says she is the boss and businesswoman of the HSL company. She would like to schedule a meeting with the leader of the Shimen family. The guy gets all infatuated and says he will call the leader immediately, and we see that a beautiful woman can always be more convincing. Julia jokes saying, no one knows the name Federico, and he was acting too cocky. In response, Fred says these simple subordinates don't know who he is. The leader of the Shimen family is named Dung, and was fishing at a small pond. An employee informs that a fish bit the bait, but the guy wasn't very excited. The fish even jumps out and they say the lady from HSL is outside, asking for an audience. He asks who this woman is, and the employee repeats that it is the lady from HSL. The Shimen family leader replies he is not interested in talking to her. When the guy was about to leave, he asks if there was anyone else with that woman. The employee says there was a nobody called Federico. The leader is surprised and immediately orders them to be called in. The employee doesn't know what is happening since he knows the HSL leader but not this Federico. The boss orders to immediately prepare the reception hall and bring the best food. The employee returns to the entrance and says they are allowed to enter. He also says the boss is waiting for Federico inside. Julia is amazed while Jang says Fred is much more powerful than she imagined. They enter the mansion. The place is grand and they are warmly welcomed. The guy welcomes Federico and says they finally met. He calls the protagonist young hero. He gets all excited, saying he already knows all his achievements in the city. Fred asks if this guy is the master of the Kimen family. The guy says yes and says that since they are intelligent people, they won't waste time. They will get straight to the point. He immediately asks if Fred came looking for help against the Vangue family. Jang is surprised because he wasn't as incompetent as people said. Fred hopes he can cooperate in this alliance. The guy says the Vangue family is very dominating and arrogant, that sooner or later they will fight against each other. That's why it's in Shimen family's interest to get an ally to face them. But this task is not simple. Our hero starts saying he could give half of the Vangue family's assets if they win. But that wasn't what the Vangue family leader wanted. He expected Federico to become the commercial director of the school that was about to open. Julia says no, saying they would never accept to be employees of another family. The guy explains they misunderstood. It wasn't to be an employee. He only wanted him to teach at their cultivation academy. Jang asks if he is afraid that after defeating the Vangue family, everyone will unite to end the Shimen family. He says that is exactly it and he should worry. But she assures that the former master of the Shimen family is still very powerful, that he could protect them from that. The guy says his father isn't in good health as before. And if a big war between families happens, his father won't have strength to protect them. That's why he wants to hire Fred to be the master of their cultivation sect. But he said he came to the city to found his own sect, so he would never accept to be an employee of someone else. He won't accept being anyone's hunting dog. He also guarantees that if in the future the Kimen family has problems, he will be there to help. The guy asks how if he broke his own school and wasn't hired by the Yu family. That makes Fred furious. The guy is embarrassed because he misunderstood. He thought Federico worked for the Yu family. He said he fought against the Chen and Zhang families because they plotted against his cultivation sisters. The guy is embarrassed because he thought Federico was just a lackey. Julia also gets angry and asks if the Human family thought they were just employees. The guy assures it was a misunderstanding and apologizes. Since Fred wants to found his own cultivation school, he will give total support. He asks if he would accept help to overthrow the Wang family. The guy said yes, because this family is getting more arrogant and in the future will try to harm his. So he is willing to help. Fred agrees and says they need to sign a contract. They shake hands. The guy is very excited and shakes hands vigorously. However, they must wait a bit, because the old master is there and wants to test Fred's strength. The guy guarantees his father thinks Federico is very powerful, and doesn't need to test him. But the old man told his son to shut up, saying the Wang family has grown very strong, so it wouldn't be just any alliance that would defeat them. He also said that for the boy not to make fools of them, he needs to prove he is worthy of the alliance. It seems no one knew he reached the Sea of Qi realm. So he agrees and says he will show the old man that he is worthy of the alliance, and asks how to convince the old man he has strength to defeat the Wang family leader. The old man says that although elderly, he is still at the peak of the Sea of Qi, so he will be this young man's opponent. Julia, when she heard about this level of power, got a bit worried. She also didn't know Fred's current cultivation level. However, the redhead agreed, saying that if it was better for his father, he would like to test Federico's strength, if everything was fine for him. Cracking his knuckles, he said everything was fine. He wanted to battle the old man to show his strength. So they went to an arena, and Fred said that if he happened to offend the old man by any carelessness, he should apologize. In response, the old Sheeman said he had trained for decades. To reach his level, the boy would have to train at least 50 more years. A bit bold, our Frederico said, that if the old man could push him out of that circle, he could consider himself the winner. Even the old man said this young guy was very bold. He immediately charged, saying the boy had lost and prepared to block the attack. The old man hit our hero's arm with full force. However, the defense was so strong that the old man got scared. If Fred used his full power, he could throw the old man far away. Realizing the boy had a certain level of power, he assured he would use a bit more of his cultivation. Those watching said that Grandpa was really amazing. They commented that he only got the fortune he has today because of his strength. But hey guys, will our protagonist be able to stop that marriage? And who will win this battle? Our dear Frederico or the leader of the Vangue family? If you want the continuation of Part 4 of this story, leave it in the comments. I already read it and can say for sure that it's really good. So that's it for today, guys. See you